Welcome to The People Make the Places, Mike May and Friends, episode 24, August 2026, Mexico from 2006 to 2026. I could say my Mexico connection goes back even further given that my grandparents were born in Monclova, Mexico in the late 1800s. Our mother, OJ, was born in Chile, so I have an affinity for the Latin culture. I first wrote a story about Mexico in episode 11 with the Ambassador Josh Adventures in 1980 when my grad school roommate Yost and I went to Oaxaca. That was my first time in Mexico. I had some other trips in the 90s to Mexico City and Querétaro for an assistive technology conference. The larger-than-life person for those visits was Roberto Diaz del Campo. Those trips were with my first wife, Jennifer. My wife, Gena, and I had a wonderful trip to Cancun with our friends Paul and Jimmy Sue Ponchilla in 2021. I think because of the shorter flight times, I have gravitated to the Puerto Vallarta side of the country. This episode will step through a half dozen trips in the 2000s with a guest appearance by Rich Irwin, one of our early and devoted Braille Note GPS users. I have lost touch with Rich. If you have ever wondered about cruising with your guide dog, check out his detailed description of 10 days cruising, read by my AI voice. Thursday, November 10th, 2005, Mexico Cruise on Dawn Princess by Rich Irwin. The cab arrived at my house at 10:15 as planned. He got me to the Days Inn at 10:40, where I was to catch the Sonoma Airport Express at 11:15. As he was letting me out, I got a call from Marty, the contractor who was doing some remodeling on my house while I was gone, who told me that my tickets were lying in the driveway. No cabs could be found in the east, so my cab driver, Carl, immediately left for my house. He had the tickets handed to him by Marty, like Pony Express. As the bus was pulling into the driveway of the Days Inn, the cab was right behind him. The original fare for McCall, our bags, and myself was $33. The fare for the tickets was $70. Wow, what a start. Taking the Sonoma Airport Express was definitely the way for McCall and I to get to the ship. The bus pulled right up to the Dawn Princess inside Pier 35 in San Francisco. As soon as I got off the bus, Irene met us. She handed us off to Brian, who escorted us through check-in. At that point, Mike took over and escorted us to our cabin on the Aloha deck, Deck 11. The only challenge with this process was that my luggage was split up and did not make it to the room very promptly. McCall and I arrived at our cabin at 13:30. McCall's bag with his food in it arrived at 14:30. The ship passed under the Golden Gate Bridge at 1700. My luggage with my clothes finally showed up in our cabin at 1745, just in time to get my jacket out before we hurried off to dinner at 1800. Arrangements had been made for McCall and I to have roommates. They were Rod and Justice from Spokane. They took Amtrak to get to San Francisco and ended up being the last to show up. At dinner, there was some confusion about the seating arrangements for Rod and I. As a result, we ended up at a rectangular table for 6 persons, also 4 guide dogs. That meant that there were 28 legs under the table, not including the 4 for the table itself. The attendees were Judy with guide Tipton, her sister Pat with Kane, Carol and Joe with his guide Mogan, Rod and Justice, and McCall and myself. Too many legs and too little space, but we were all able to enjoy our dinners. Friday, November 11th, 2005, Rich Irwin. Day 1, Mexico Cruise on Dawn Princess. First, a nice casual breakfast in the dining room, then a meeting of our group at 10:30. Diana and Andy arranged for us to meet the other members of our group. In total, there were about 60 persons consisting of 22 blind and visually impaired, 19 guide dogs, and the remaining being family and friends. There were a couple of surprise reacquaintances for me. The biggest surprise was to literally run into Tom and his guide Cola. I had met Tom in Dublin, Ireland last year when I was there with the Way Fun group. Cola is the first Irish guide dog to be allowed into the United States. His wife, Breege, was with him to celebrate their 25th anniversary. Breege also has a guide dog, but they did not bring her. The other surprise was Ayaka and her guide, Pablo. Ayaka and I originally met at the Lighthouse a few years ago. I have mentioned a couple of others that we met at dinner last night. The rest will be mentioned as we encounter them along the way. I will, however, mention at this point that there were 3 Judys in the group. Good thing their dogs did not have the same names. The first I would like to mention was Judy with guide Purdy. She and Purdy have been on over 20 cruises together, including the crossing of the Atlantic and visits to St. Petersburg, Russia, and to Turkey. The ship anchored in Avalon Harbor off Santa Catalina Island at 1300. McCall and I chose to take a tour of the island, including a stop for a walk, non-guided, of the botanical gardens. This was my first opportunity to fire up the Braille Note GPS. I marked the dock where the tenders unloaded us. I later learned that this was valuable as the tour ended in the main town of Avalon, a little over a quarter of a mile away. Dawn and Catherine and her guide Cypress also chose to take this tour. They live near the Oregon campus of Guide Dogs for the Blind, where she got Cypress. While we were in the botanical gardens, I demonstrated the Braille Note and GPS system to Catherine. As is often the case with older persons, she had expressed a concern that it would be too complicated for her to learn, as she had tried a computer and just could not get the hang of it. She was quite surprised how easy it was to operate, and in less than 15 minutes asked where she could get one. The tour ended in town where McCall and I befriended two sisters, Diana and Joni, who were on the cruise, but not part of our group. The four of us navigated our way into several shops and bought various souvenirs. They had some maps that they would have stamped in several of the shops, while I would mark the shops as poise. I checked the route back to the ship with the GPS, and the three of us and McCall walked back. Before dinner, Rod and I were given a letter to inform us that we had new table assignments for dinner. We both were assigned to a large round table of 8. The 8 persons consisted of Rod and I, and our guides, Justice and McCall, Don and his wife Catherine and her guide Cypress, and 2 couples, Steve and Nanette, and Dennis and Judy. The 2 couples had been on a previous cruise to Alaska with guide dogs and were friends of Jim and Vicky and her guide Frida, who did not come on this trip because they were in the process of moving to Hawaii. Saturday, November 12th, 2005, Rich Irwin. Day 2, Mexico cruise on Dawn Princess. This was the first of 2 full days at sea. Diana made arrangements for us to bring our dogs up the 15th deck, where they netted off the swimming pool and deck area around it, and let them off leash for a while to play. The dogs seemed to really enjoy it. However, if there were more than 6 dogs at a time, they seemed harder to keep from getting too rambunctious. McCall seemed to ignore all other dogs except one. That was Canette. Canette was the smallest, a black female lab that McCall followed everywhere and just would not leave alone. She was the guide for Eunice, who was also with her husband Al and son Dale, who had guide Ambler. While Al did not have a guide, he did have some visual impairment, but not enough that he could not be sighted help for his wife and son. Sunday, November 13th, 2005, Rich Irwin, Day 3, Mexico cruise. Our second full day at sea, and the dogs seemed to start having problems with relieving number 2. Actually, the main problem for McCall was that he was extremely reluctant to want to go into the relieving area at all. Once I was able to get him to enter the room and then a box, he would do number 1 quite quickly. But he refused to do number 2 at all. Temperature was in the 80s, as was the humidity. The dogs were again given time to play, but in general, they were much more sedate this time. Again, McCall focused his attention on Canette. Flyers had been delivered to all passengers on the ship. There would be a 1-hour petting and information session on the 15th deck for all passengers. It seemed to be a great success, as over 200 passengers attended, and the dogs loved the attention. It was also a great opportunity for the passengers to learn about guide dogs. Monday, November 14th, 2005, Rich Irwin, Day 4, Mexico cruise. The ship anchored offshore at Puerto Vallarta at 700. Therefore, we were tendered to the dock at Puerto Vallarta. Since there are no maps for Mexico and I could not find any POIs in the commercial database, I needed to generate my own points of interest. The first point I marked on Mexico's soil was where the tender docked in Puerto Vallarta. I chose to take a shore excursion titled Hacienda Tile and Tequila. I was not aware that the first 2 hours of the tour would involve 2 stops at what I will call tourist shopping malls. We were quick to learn that tourist monies are primary to the Mexican economy. These shopping malls were in town and near the beach hotels. It was interesting to walk the streets without any intersections being announced. I asked some of the other passengers what the street names were in hopes that I could mark some of the intersections. It seems that they were at the same disadvantage as they could not find any street signs. After shopping, we were taken by bus to the tile factory. There we took a tour and had the opportunity to shop their showroom. After seeing some of their sinks and tile displays, I was wishing that we had been there before remodeling my bathrooms rather than after. Next, we boarded the buses for a 1-hour trip to the hacienda, which according to the Braille note GPS was only 9 miles away. There we were served a lunch of open-faced tacos cooked over an open fire. After lunch, we walked next door and took a tour of a tequila factory, followed by a session of tasting 8 different tequilas. The bus ride back to the dock was much more relaxing. I need to add that McCall had no problems anywhere we went in Puerto Vallarta, including the tequila factory. The tequila vats were open-topped and only about 3 feet off the floor. We tendered back to the ship, and it weighed anchor at 1700. Tuesday, November 15th, 2005, Rich Irwin. Day 5, Mexico cruise. We arrived at Mazatlan at 700 and again anchored offshore. We tendered to shore again, and I marked where the tender docked in case I needed it later in the day. The shore excursion I chose for McCall and I was the walking tour of Old Mazatlan. This tour was very interesting and took over 3.5 hours. Consequently, I was able to mark many points of interest. It was also quite draining on myself and especially McCall as the temperature reached 90 degrees Fahrenheit while the relative humidity was about 90%. I carried a bottle of water for McCall, which he finished off before the end of the walking tour. There was a shopping market along the dock where we picked up a couple of items before returning to the ship. The ship weighed anchor at 16:30. Wednesday, November 16th, 2005, Rich Irwin. Day 6, Mexico cruise. At 800, the ship anchored in Cabo San Lucas Harbor. The shore excursion we chose for this port was a Land's End boat tour and scenic drive. We walked the short distance from where the tender docked over to a beautiful catamaran for the cruise to Land's End. During the cruise, they ran a Jacques Cousteau narration of the area. However, we ended up being seated where we could not hear it, as they had no speakers mounted in our part of the boat. Upon returning to the dock, we were escorted onto buses and taken on a non-narrated scenic drive to Giorgio's restaurant, where we were served refreshments consisting of soft drinks or beer. During the boat ride to Land's End, McCall and I befriended a mother and daughter, Elizabeth and Karen, and another couple, Barbara and Merrill, who were from Seattle. We visited together at Georgia's and decided to have lunch together when we got back to town. All 6 of us fit into the Mexican taxi. For those that do not know, a Mexican taxi is a pickup with benches in the back. The taxi took us directly to the shrimp factory, a restaurant that served all sorts of shrimp dishes. One could even get bowls of shrimp by the kilo. One could get 1/2 kilo, 1 kilo, 2 kilo, or 3 kilo bowls. You had to do your own shelling. After lunch, the 6 of us visited several local shops. The ladies found one shop they particularly liked and bartered with the owner for nearly an hour and came away with a lot of nice jewelry. Merrill and I decided to walk back to the dock and let the ladies take a taxi. I had marked the dock when we arrived and set that as our destination. Merrill was sure he knew the way, but the GPS told me it was in the opposite direction. To resolve the issue, I suggested that we ask someone. He tried 3 persons, none of whom spoke any English, and he did not speak any Spanish. With my limited Spanish, I was able to ask the 4th person where the water was. He pointed in the direction my GPS had recommended originally. So we set out and periodically checked the distance. When we got within 245 feet of the dock, Merrill spotted it. We tendered back to the ship in time for it to weigh anchor at 16:30. In the next couple of days, I had several passengers ask me about the GPS system that had helped Merrill and I find our way back to the ship. He had told several people about our adventure. Thursday, November 17th, 2005, Rich Irwin. Day 7, Mexico cruise. This was a relaxing day at sea. From 1100 to 1300, deck 15 was netted off so the dogs could run and play off leash. One could tell that the dogs were getting to know each other better as there was more running and playing. This was our second formal night at dinner. Everyone dressed themselves and their dogs early for a photo session at 16:30. 2 group photos were taken. The first was of all the dogs with the captain and officers holding their leashes. The second included all members of the tour group and the dogs. Both photos came out great. Friday, November 18th, 2005, Rich Irwin. Day 8, Mexico cruise, and we actually docked at 800 in San Diego. Our dock site was between the oldest registered U.S. warship, the Star of India, and the aircraft carrier Midway. Both of these ships are permanently docked and available for tour. The newest and largest U.S. aircraft carriers, the Nimitz and the Reagan, were both in port. McCall and I chose to take an Old Town San Diego trolley tour. How interesting it was to again hear the Braille note announce intersections and points of interest. There were still many points that were worth marking that did not seem to be in the commercial database. The tour took us to Coronado and the famous Hotel Coronado, Balboa Park, and the famous San Diego Zoo. The tour guide pointed out several locations where scenes for the movie Top Gun were filmed. After the tour, McCall and I teamed up with a couple from Roseville that we first met on our Mazatlan shore excursion. We took the trolley to Seaport Village, where we had a very nice seafood lunch. Apparently, we were all shopped out as we decided to just take a leisurely walk along the harbor back towards the ship. This was an easy walk of about 0.5 miles. The ship departed San Diego at 17:30. Saturday, November 19th, 2005, Rich Irwin, our 9th day of the cruise and the 4th and final full day at sea. The only planned events for this day were another exercise session for the dogs from 1100 to 1300 and a public petting session from 1400 to 1500. Well, it finally happened. Both Rod and I returned to our cabin briefly with our dogs in harness. He was just going to get his jacket, and I was going to use the bathroom before we left again. Therefore, neither of us felt the need to remove the harness or for me to put McCall on tie down. He left. While I was in the bathroom, I decided to sit on the bed and give McCall some personal attention for a few minutes before we left. I started petting him and immediately realized that it was not McCall, but Justice. I instantly ran out into the hall and instinctively called out McCall. Apparently, Rod only had hold of the leash because as soon as he heard his name, he turned and started running back to me, pulling the leash out of Rod's hand. He was extremely excited to see me. Rod said that he could not figure why McCall kept looking back, as that was not normal for Justice. Although the time that we were separated from our dogs was only a few minutes, it was impressive to see how much they missed us and how happy they were to reunite with us. The session with the passengers was just as popular as it was earlier in the week. In the first session, the passengers not only wanted to pet the dogs, but also were curious about their age, how long they were working, and various training questions. This time, many were persons who had met us during the cruise and were thanking us for cruising with them and how much they enjoyed observing the dogs working and how well they all behaved. In my case, I am sure that McCall opened the door to several new friendships for me. Sunday, November 20th, 2005, Rich Irwin. Last day, Mexico cruise. The Dawn Princess sailed under the Golden Gate Bridge at 500, signifying the completion of another wonderful cruise. It docked at Pier 35 at 600, and disembarkation began at 700. Thanks to the never-ending diligence and efforts of Diana and Andy, disembarking was a piece of cake, especially compared to past experiences. There was someone either from the cruise lines or the port there every step of the way. The Sonoma Airport Express pulled up right in front of where they seated me. The bus driver called for a cab to meet me at the Days Inn, which it did, and I was home by 1200. I went on 2 trips to the Puerto Vallarta area. It is fun to have 14 people under one roof with staff to take care of everything. We did this once with family and another time with friends. Mike May and friends. Friday, June 16th, 2006. Villa Celeste, Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco, Mexico. Location, 2035 17.0340 North. Lawn, 105 14 39.5 100 West, 6 miles south of the airport, about 25 minutes drive time, 3 hours flight time from San Francisco. PV is 2 hours ahead of Pacific time equals Central time. Villa Celeste is built into the hillside, 3 bedrooms on the main level, which is 15 feet above the narrow road, and then a rocky beach. A more sandy beach is a few hundred yards up the road. 2 larger rooms are on the upper level past an interim level with one of the 3 bars. There is a large pool and bar on the main level. The main dining area can easily seat 14. It is all open to the sprawling decks of stone pavers. The bedrooms are air-conditioned. The entire villa is 16,000 feet, 5 bedrooms, 7 baths. 4 of the rooms have king beds, 1 has 2 queens. There are various sleeping pads or benches. Room 1 has the giant jacuzzi. The view is west over the ocean. There are 3 staff, an incredible cook, the waiter/butler, and a maid. There is no high-speed internet, phones in each room. Power is standard North American 110. There are various televisions and stereo systems. Local amenities include the Lindemar Beach Resort and Restaurant and the El Set Restaurant 100 yards away. The taxi to town is $3 to $5. All the typical water sports are available: diving, snorkeling, parasailing, etc. There is a canopy zipline tour nearby. It was tempting to relax and spend all our time at that grand villa. Here is one excursion that got me riled up. Wednesday, June 21st, 2006, still pissed. In some cultures, this means I have had too much to drink. In my case, it means I have just been denied access and I'm very angry about it. It takes a lot to get under my skin, but there is something about discrimination that hurts to the core, literally a sick feeling in my stomach. When we were in Costa Rica over a year ago, we tried to go on a canopy tour but got rained out. Our guide said that other blind people had done this before, so there shouldn't be any problem, nothing to be done about the weather, so it didn't happen, and I never got our $150 back either. Today in Puerto Vallarta, we went to the offices of El Eden to take their tour. It was I and 5 family members ranging from my 9-year-old niece to my wife and our boys. I left my dog at the villa, and when they saw my cane, they said straight away that I wouldn't be able to go on the canopy tour. The owners were called and they absolutely refused, despite all my explanations about having gone skydiving and holding the downhill speed skiing record for a totally blind person. I said I could bring my walkie-talkie radios, but they would have none of it. The little 9-year-old could do it, but not a blind adult, no way, shape, or form. It was very frustrating not to have any leverage. I considered walking out of the office and finding another company, but chances were very good that the same denial would happen elsewhere. My family would have backed me up, but I hated to have the kids again miss the opportunity for this spectacular experience. I couldn't bribe the company. There was simply no recourse. So I paid for 5 canopy tickets and transportation for me. I figured there was a long shot that I could talk someone at the actual tour site into letting me go. We clambered into this huge truck and proceeded to wind our way south of Puerto Vallarta, several miles before we turned inland into the jungle. It was one bumpy ride, ending up at a very busy collection of bars and restaurants along a small river, the staging site for the canopy tour. It wasn't that far in miles from PV, but it took 40 butt-pounding minutes. I stayed with my family through the orientation. I felt the harness, helmet, and the cables they would be sliding on. They would hike up about 1,000 feet in elevation and then clip into the cables and slide about 1.5 miles at speeds up to 60 miles per hour. There was staff stationed at every transition point. The tricky part for a blind person would be knowing when to put on the brakes. A guide waves at you when to brake and when to stop braking. I figured this would be quite easily done by radio. They did have 2-way radios at the staging area, and I had to assume each of the guides would have radios as well. One of the staff giving the orientation spoke English very well, so I made my plea to him. We discussed how it could be done, and he began to waver. He told someone else I wanted to go, and they said no way. So here I sit, sweltering in the bar, drinking Pacifico beer and listening to the sound of the zip lines in the distance, punctuated by hoops and hollers. I'll have to be content with my boys' excitement when they get back and relate the details. I hate that I am not being allowed to share the experience with them simply out of ignorance. As we rode here in the truck, I had one of the boys on either side of me. Despite humid weather, they silently expressed their love and support by cuddling up to me. Occasionally one would say, "I can't believe they won't let a blind person do this. This is really stupid." I was thinking what an important lesson it was for them to experience discrimination firsthand. They are relatively privileged kids growing up in a culturally open community but without any exposure to race issues. How would boys in this environment come into contact with racial bias or profiling? When they saw their dad discriminated against, they could learn personally about that back of the bus feeling brought about through discrimination. I will definitely be using this experience to teach them that there is always a way to do something. I will contact the management. I will find other companies in other countries if necessary until I can go on a canopy tour with my boys. Now I am motivated not only because of the thrill of the adventure, but because of the quest to resolve the discrimination and to work out the details of how to best do a zip line for a blind person. There is another expression which probably doesn't translate very well into Spanish. It ain't over until the fat lady sings. I can always fold up my cane, put on dark glasses, and just won't let on that I am blind next time. I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Sunday, July 29th, 2012, an adventure in San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato, Mexico. We have spent a week exploring this charming artistic community at 6,000 feet elevation with temperatures mostly in the 70s. Most streets are cobbled, a real challenge for cane users. We are 2 visually impaired adults and 2 children. I am the only one that speaks a modicum of Spanish. I am using the Braille Note PK. And Gena is using the Braille Sense on hand with Mexico maps, and PO is loaded. High roaming charges have limited our use of the cell phone for navigation and for phone calls. Mobility is a challenge with the narrow, cobbled streets and sidewalks, which are as skinny as 18 inches with lots of steps up and down. I have recorded over 70 user points of interest in San Miguel. The maps are pretty good, but I'd say only about 25% of businesses are in the points of interest database. The new user POI sharing features of our 2012 version have helped a lot. Feel free to download the User America's POI file to see for yourself where we have been, even if you don't load Mexico maps. We have explored on our own and with the help of my friend Roberto Diaz del Campo of the adaptive technology company Antark, and by his very charming daughter, Harubi. On Friday, Harubi hooked us up with a guide who picked us up in his van and showed us around what I would call the alternative tourist spots. I couldn't help but think of our way fun adventures. San Miguel would certainly be a fun place to come with an adventuresome group. Among many interesting spots, he took us to one of the oldest chapels in San Miguel called Santa Cruz, built in 1555. From there, he described 3 blocks of stairs that comprised an alley straight up 3 blocks to a lookout point. He said he would drive us the long way around. Of course, we opted to walk and have him meet us there. It turned out there were 211 stairs. It wasn't always obvious where the next set of stairs was when we crossed a street. Sure enough, when we ran out of stairs, there was no lookout and no guide meeting us. This is where the adventure got challenging. Should we go back down, look on one of the other streets we crossed? We found a hotel called the Mirador, the lookout, and wondered if that is what he meant. I asked a few people where the lookout was, and they all pointed us down a very steep hill and said to find the church and then turn left. This was concerning because we didn't want to find ourselves at the bottom and have to climb 211 stairs all over again. And I had marked points along the way, of course, and was actively using my GPS to see where we had been and what points were nearby. I couldn't call the guide because we didn't have his number. Finally, we went into a hotel and I called Harubi and got the guide's phone number. I told him where we were and he came and met us. We were only about 200 meters from the lookout, which turned out to be a lovely vista over San Miguel. As we always say, it's better to travel hopefully than to arrive. It was really the process of exploring on our own that was the real fun in the journey, even with a little trepidation when we were separated from our guide. Thank goodness for having a strong spirit of adventure for the Sendero GPS and a happy ending to the story. Little did I know with those earlier trips to Puerto Vallarta that I would be remarried and we would end up with a home in the area. Here is Gena to talk about that.
I was looking for a second home that was outside of the United States in an area that had warm weather. I love the beach. I love Mexican people, the Mexican culture, Spanish language. So it came to be that one of the best places, proximity to the Bay Area and many other places, there's direct flights to Puerto Vallarta. So that was the beginning of the search. Then we did a whole bunch of searching on little individual towns along the seaside. And Bucerias is a very small beach town, not super touristy, only 25 minutes from the airport. Great beach, great restaurants, lots of Hispanic people. Also, we found a community that's a lot of expats, but it's a very close community. They are all very connected. They're lovely people. So here we've made a lot of friends, as well as there's a lot of interaction with the Mexican people, which I'm really interested in, and I'm getting to practice Spanish. The town has a lot of little shops and restaurants. Some are touristy focused, many are not. So you can have the complete Mexican experience as if you lived here full time. And Bucerias has many people that live here full time. And just for visiting tourists, they have cute shops, lots of good grocery stores. One of the things we love is that it is quick from PV to Bucerias. And from Bucerias, there's many little towns that offer all kinds of things, from hot springs to neat markets to farmers markets to inland where there's national parks, and there is all the beach activities. So you can kind of find everything you'd be looking for. A couple things that we've done that were super fun. One of our friends, Santiago, took me fishing for my birthday. So fishing is a wonderful thing that many people do here. There's also a great chocolate plantation, cacao plantation, really close to our house. And it's just a beautiful experience where you learn all about how they make cacao and all their products. And there's lots of little activities like that. There's a lot of other activities such as tequila tasting if you're into tequila. Lots of opportunities to do Mexican cooking, like a whole cooking experience. There's zip lining, there's surfing, all kinds of surfing. And we're about 30 minutes away from Sayulita, which is one of the best surfing locations near Puerto Vallarta. So that's a really popular spot, and for people loving surfing, it's great. I was looking for a house in a community that was very Hispanic-like. So I wanted really colorful tiles, beautiful floors, not something we could just find in America. And so we found this beautiful house, and it has an amazing swimming pool, which I'm in right now. Splash, splash. It also has authentic tiles, lots of authentic furniture, Mexican art. So would love that. It has a neat, really neat little extra pool house. So the washer and dryer are in there, and it has a very nice, beautiful bathroom. And it's a place we can be, even if we have lots of work to do or if we want to exercise. There's a lot of great spaces in the house, just the way the layout is. And it is a super safe community. So we feel really safe here. And I love that if I just want to stay self-contained for days, I can do that. It's been very pleasant. One of the most unique things was that there's a beautiful mural here, and there's 40-foot walls all around the property, so it's very private and has gorgeous palm trees and amazing birds. Every single morning, I sit out and I have a dialogue with the birds. They're unique. They're not the same as in California. And this mural goes across the entire back wall of our property. So it's got a fishing boat on it and jumping dolphins and whales, and it's very authentic, and it's placed right behind the swimming pool. So it looks like this image that the ocean is part of this mural, and it wraps around to another wall. So it's really extravagant, extremely beautiful. One of the neat features of the layout of the house is that it's 2 floors. The top floor has a very beautiful open but covered patio. So if it's having a downpour, you can hear all the great sounds and beautiful breezes. And there's a lot of outdoor beautiful patio furniture, again, completely covered. And I do yoga up there. There's a lot of really cool things to do up there. There's a grand patio where we actually have had multiple pool parties. And that's just a space where there's a gorgeous dining table and people can just play and have the room they need, as well as be swimming at the same time. It has a wonderful outdoor cooking area. So a big commercial grill, a marble bar with a sink and lots of space so you can actually really do your dishes when you're outside, really put the amenities out that you need while you're prepping food. So it's very functional. The outdoor living is as functional as the indoor living is. Upstairs, there's 2 really nice, spacious bedrooms and a beautiful bathroom attached to this gorgeous sort of indoor-outdoor patio that I mentioned. And downstairs, there's 2 really beautiful bedrooms and a big open kitchen family room layout. So traditional, which a lot of us like now and is very common, but you can be in the kitchen cooking and connected to everybody in the family room. So we've watched basketball games, we've watched soccer games, we've just had a lot of fun times here. The house also has a total of 3 kitchens. So the one downstairs, the bar, kitchen, grill outside, and upstairs in that area has a full kitchen as well. So no matter where you want to be or how many people want to stay, in the top patio could sleep so many people on mats or sleeping bags, and the grand patio too. So the house can accommodate a lot of people and has a real party, fun, festive feel. It really is the people that make the places. And when we bought the house actually had a housekeeper, Felicia. She's worked at the house for 17 years, so we didn't know certain things like how do we get the garage door to open? And she, of course, has the answers to many things. There's also a pool guy and a gardener, so they come a couple times a week, and that's not just a luxury, it's kind of a necessity because there's a lot of outdoor shrubbery and things, so things go flying and the winds kick up. Also, part of being here and meeting our neighbors, we met a wonderful contractor, Santiago, and it's unique that he has many, many skills. So he has fixed anything that's come up for us, and we have never been treated so kindly and nicely by a person. I mean, Santiago, one night I had a girlfriend staying here with me and the shower flooded where she was. And it was 9 o'clock at night, and I simply texted him to ask him to bring fans the next day. And she and I were cleaning up, and he called and said, "Oh, I can come and help." And I was like, no, it's too late. You shouldn't do that. And he just insisted. So he came over and he helped clean up. And we've been doing some really neat projects around the house. So we installed solar. So we're fully on our own with solar and batteries. We do not rely on the local energy supplier because the energy is really inconsistent. So that's been great. And just any kind of project we need, if we want to do a little remodel, Santiago knows how. He makes it easy. Just recently also, he assisted me in climbing up this gigantic ladder to what we would call an attic that I wanted to understand what the space was like. And he has all the faith that I can climb the ladder, which I did. But it was just sweet and kind, and he knows like we can do everything, and he doesn't treat us strangely because we're blind or like we need any extra help. And we love that. The attitude here about blindness has been awesome. We've also learned about lots of tools and technology. So transportation is a challenge if you're blind and then plopped in an area that you've never been before. So between GPS and networking, we have learned and met many drivers, and there's Uber and there's InDrive. And even the neighbors, sometimes they're going to the airport area and they've offered to give us a ride. So we have made amazing contacts and have tremendous resources. And tonight we're going to a new restaurant that one of our neighbors owns, and we've never been there, and we're using a driver that we met. Even the shops nearby and the people that can assist are happy to go shopping before we get here. So it's been amazing living made easy.
The expats and locals of the Colibri neighborhood certainly exemplify the people who make the places. There is no better example than Santiago. For lack of a better term, we would call him our contractor. He is much more than that, a friend. He has a sensitivity about blindness that comes from him being a caring, generous, observant person.
My name is Santiago Gonzalez. I am from Michoacán, Mexico.
¿En dónde está nacimiento?
En el Estado de Mexico. I left Mexico when I was like 14 years old to go to the States and work. I was over there with my dad for around 4 years, and then I come back. And then I went back again to work for like another 4 years, and then come back over here because my mom got a little sick. And then I stayed here in Mexico ever since. I was in Charleston, South Carolina. I was living and working there. But I also moved to another states to work, like Florida, North Carolina, Georgia.
So you're skilled in many different ways, as we have found out. It's, we asked Santiago, can you do this? Can you do that? And the answer is always yes. So tell us about all your different skills and things that you have learned to do and what you like to do.
I learned to do a lot of things because my dad he did all these kind of jobs, and when I was working in the States, like we got a like hour and a half for lunch break, right? Because some part out there is very hot, so there was always many other houses around where we work. In my lunch break, sometimes I'll go up there with the other people, and they was doing some painting or they was doing some drywall, and I will help them for free just to learn a little bit about what they was doing, right? And that helped me a lot. Like, did help me a lot. I learned to do some painting, drywall, framing, tile, a little bit of landscaping, roofing, installing windows, and other kinds of
HVAC?
Sí, señor.
Didn't you tell me you had been trained in how to deal with intersection signal lights?
Well, that was more here in Mexico. My dad was his job here in Mexico is an electrician, right? So he would take me over there and teach me all this kind of stuff. Like, he would, if a lamp on the street it wasn't working right, we was going over there and fix it, and intersection lights and all the kinds of stuff. He fixed that, and he'd take me with him,
And now you even know how to put up a ham radio antenna.
that was new for me, yeah. But well, we did it wrong the first time, but but we fixed it.
So one of the things, Santiago, that was really interesting is that it seems like in the United States, a contractor or a tradesperson has one specialty. They're either a roofer or they handle drywall or painting. And in your case, it seems like you're really skilled at many, many of the trades that are required. Is that just special to you, or other contractors in Mexico specialize in a lot of things?
No, I think a lot of Mexicans working in the States specialize in a lot of things, not just one, because in many times of the year we cannot work at just one work, like framing. You can just do so much framing for so much long, right? I mean, and like when gets cold over there, the work slows down. So sometimes we have to find other things to do. We even went to the fields to pick up some pickles. In my case, I was trying to learn as much as I can for the future. That's what my grandpa always told me. Learn everything you can, right?
Yeah, that's a good motto. Well, I think Mike and I, it's been wonderful that you know how to do so many things, because in the United States, every time we need something done, we have to find a new professional that knows how to do that particular thing. I wanted to ask what you thought when you heard that your client was blind.
I really thought that was going to be challenging, but it's really fun to work with you, and but I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's fun. I like it. One time, it was this lady that we went over there to look for some tiles at the store. We went like 6 times, And I have to say, the 7th day, I have to say, you know what? Um, I got to do some work because otherwise I'm gonna break. Yeah, and then she went by herself and finally picked up the tile that she needed. And that day, me and Gina went over there. That was pretty fast, and I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but it was fun. Every day is learn, like I say. You learn, I learn, and
We're always
yeah,
learning.
always learning.
As I've said, the people make the places. We've just been in Mexico for not even 1 year, and you and your family have made this place special to us. How have they reacted? What do they think? Because you've been over for dinner. We've had meals together. They've come here for a pool party. So tell us about what your family are thinking about hanging out with us.
Well, my family they love hanging out with you guys, and it's my daughter Naya. She's more like quiet person, more like me, and she barely hangs out with me too. So, but yeah, she love when I told her let's go over there with Jean and Mike. They love it. They love it. Lolis love it. Little one Fidel, he loves that, and I also enjoyed that being with you guys. And thanks for letting me be part of your lives.
One of my favorite memories about being friends, besides having you help us with the things in the house, is Santiago and Lolis took me fishing for my birthday just about 2 months ago. And we were in a little boat on this amazing river with incredible bird sounds and very peaceful. And I caught a gigantic red snapper. And I was so excited. And that was so special. I really appreciate that because you're local and you like fishing, you know where the river is and you know what kind of fish and how to do it. And that was so special. So thank you for that.
Oh, we enjoy it. Me and Lolis enjoy it. And everybody I showed the video. I got the video on my phone of Gina catching a big snapper. And everybody I showed the video, they say I'm loco. I'm too loco. Yeah, but it was fun. I enjoy it. And I hope you did too.
I did. It was amazing.
Every time we call Santiago with some problem, boom, he's here and helps out.
Always great to help you guys. It's always a pleasure.
That is a wrap. My deepest thanks to friends, family, and our new adopted Colibri neighbors for being the people who make these places in Mexico. Apologies for butchering of any Spanish. Y con esto terminamos. Mi más profundo agradecimiento a nuestros amigos, familiares y nuevos vecinos adoptivos de Colibrí por ser las personas que hacen tan especiales estos lugares de México. Les pido disculpas por haber pronunciado tan mal algunas palabras en español. Stay tuned for the next episode the first Saturday in September when we will be in Catania, Italy with a new Wayfund trip through the Blind Travel Foundation. The music I associate with our second home in Mexico would be that booming from the wireless party box at our pool when we have Santiago and family over for a barbecue.
¿Qué será que tienen tus labios que no me dejan respirar al mirarlos? Yo no sé qué tienen tus ojos que si me ven se me acelera el corazón. Es que me tienes de lado a lado como nunca me había pasado. Hasta despierta te estoy soñando, de noche, de día, tu boca y la